This episode is proudly supported by Pepe Sayer Australian Cultured Butter.
At Pepe Sayer, we focus on quality. So if someone comes into your restaurant and they see you're using Pepe Sayer, they know immediately that that is a quality product you've got in front of you on the table. And that comes from a decade of just doing quality butter day after day.
For more information, go to pepesayer.com.au.
It's special because there's so many beautiful restaurants and so many great chefs up here to share it with. That they're not competition at the end of the day. They're another voice in the call to get good people to the region.
This is The Crackling. I'm Anthony Huckstep. Working at a restaurant with a profound signature dish can have a lasting impact on a chef. For Jason Saxby, the hero suckling pig he mastered at Pilu lives on in spirit as he carves his own path in northern New South Wales. Jason, how are you?
Very good, Huck. How are you, mate?
Good. It's great to get you on the show. You're doing some pretty amazing things up in northern New South Wales.
Yeah, look, just chipping away at this region bit by bit, sort of embedded myself in the community now, and that's obviously opening up lots of doors and lots of pathways to try to make my own sort of style of food, and how I also run the restaurant and run the kitchen.
You're doing amazing things up there at Raes, but a lot of your career were in some real landmark restaurants in Sydney. Was it hard to make the shift to working in a regional centre like that?
Well, look, Huck, I'm actually originally from Bathurst, so my career started in smaller regional restaurants. So I already had a fairly good understanding, obviously not to a high level, but a fairly good understanding of how working in a small environment is, and working with a small basket of producers, a small bounty of produce. So Bathurst is the climate's a little bit different than Byron Bay, but certainly the limitations and also the I suppose the opportunities are all very similar. It was hard to adjust, obviously, coming from the big city, and if the tuna you got in the morning wasn't as good as you wanted it to be, you could ring your seafood supplier, and by 12 o'clock you've got more tuna. Whereas in Byron Bay, if you don't like what you get, then that's what you get. But through that, you just actually work out what is good, and when it is good, you tend to focus a little bit more on, well, why am I trying to use that when it's not going to be good? Like, let's just stick to this because this is great. So it was took me, I reckon, at least 6 months to really, really find my feet, and then probably another 6 months to make it till I was really actually happy, till I was really it felt like I had the grasp of what the region needed.
That region has really evolved incredibly in regards to food in the last sort of 5 years or so. Tell us a little bit about it and what you love about sort of what's going on there in the food scene.
Oh, look, man, the 5 years ago when I moved up here, it has been just under 5 years now. It's a completely different food scene than it was now. Sort of, I suppose naively came to Byron Bay thinking that Raes is this absolute iconic landmark restaurant, but in reality, it's had a very sort of tumultuous past, and it's been there for 30 years. Next year marks our 30-year anniversary. So, with the amount of chefs that come in and out and all that, no one really knew what the identity of the restaurant is. It's not like Pilu, where for 20 years it's been the same chef with the same owner with the same ethos. So it really had a bit of an identity crisis with the local community about what it was. Everyone thought it was this inaccessibly expensive, ridiculous restaurant, but it really isn't in the grand scheme of things. I think it just gave off that image being such a grand building. It's just kind of like in the last few years, the amount of incredible talent that has moved to Byron Bay and the surrounding region, of course, and opened up restaurants or have taken over existing restaurants, has just lifted the scene to just such an incredible high now that there's so many good options to eat at. Whereas 5 years ago, there was a few, like there was cafes and then there was a few restaurants and that's it. So, for guests at the hotel, when they're staying for a week and they don't want to eat in the dining room every night, you're kind of like, oh, you can go eat at Harvest or you can go eat at Beach. Whereas now we've got options, so many options to recommend to staff now. So it's great.
I'm glad you sort of mentioned Pilu. You have an incredible sort of relationship that's stretched over a long period of time of working there and then going and doing your own thing and then coming back. And their signature dish, though, the suckling pig, is renowned. Tell us a little bit about that and what was so special about it at that restaurant.
Well, look, the dish itself is very simple. It really is just about getting a good product, a good pig at the right size. The way it's cooked has actually changed and evolved over the years. It's not been the same for the whole entirety of Pilu's existence. Chefs have done their part by and also technology has come a long way as well. So it's not so much to just shove it in the oven now with some salt. There's a little bit more science behind the times, temperatures, humidities, and just working out when the flesh gives and when it's at that perfectly tender moment rather than just putting it in for a set time and temperature, because obviously every pig's different. If it's 1 kilo bigger, it's going to need a little bit more cooking. So for me, it was always about working out. It's not so much about just put pigs in the oven and get them out when the timer goes off. It's about feeling the legs when you could tell that those legs had relaxed and given way to be really succulent. And, when the loin wasn't too dry yet, but was at that point where the belly was meltingly soft, and it really that's about it. Like it's truly just the quality of the pig, the time of the year, the seasonality. In winter, the pigs tend to be a little bit leaner. So it's about, manipulating the times and temperatures and humidity levels to suit the pig. But the beautiful thing with the pig at Pilu is it dominates the kitchen. Like everything in that kitchen revolves around the pig, like they get delivered on a certain day. It's all hands on deck, getting them, breaking them down, heads off, etc., getting them hung up in the fridge to dry. And then every morning, every chef knows that the pigs go in first, they get cooked. And then after that, then you can use the oven for other things. But and it's sort of, one of those things that the place is embedded, well, the pig is embedded in that place where I don't actually know how it would ever work without it.
Has that experience, with that signature dish at that restaurant, that's a big part of your sort of career, has that transferred to where you are now a little bit?
Yeah, a little bit. Look, what it did teach me is people, while necessarily you don't need to leave your menu the same, you do need to have a level of consistency where people kind of know what they're going to get. It's not necessarily about the condiments can change and the garnishes can change and how it's served or in what course it's served, etc. But if they have something to relate to your business, you're going to have a better chance of springing up in that mind. If they're like, oh man, that pig at Pilu, oh man, now I'm craving that. Now I want that. So while I don't have a deeply embedded signature dish at Raes to that extent, people know that they can always come and get certain things, but they'll be different,
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned that you grew up in Bathurst. Before we get into sort of what you are doing there at Raes, take us back to when you were young. What was growing up like for you, and what sort of role did food play for you when you were young?
Oh, look, to be completely honest, and absolutely no disrespect to family, my mum was a single mum raising 4 boys, so food was not a celebration; it was a necessity. We were very much home cooking. Bolognese was on at least once a week. My mum made a killer chicken corn soup and a killer potato and Kransky soup, and roast pork was always the loin of the pork. Dry, legs of lamb, like nothing fancy, nothing, meat and 3 veg, and really bog standard Aussie classics, I would call them. And so food never really played in my mind as anything more than just something you had to do a few times a day to stay alive. And then in high school, actually, I was always adamant that I was going to be an architect. I loved the designing and creating process. I loved drawing. I was really into drawing as a younger kid. So I really loved the thought that I was just going to go down that road to be an architect. I can design, create, draw. And then, in year 12, my school had a program where you could start your career outside of school. So one of your subjects you could dedicate to what you wanted to be. And so I did a design and technology course that would have gotten me my first certificate towards, that industry. And while I loved the design and the creation and I loved the physical aspect, I did not like sitting down. I hated sitting at a desk for hours calculating, and the glitz and glamour of the design and all that was taken away very quickly. And upon speaking to professionals, they're like, well, that's what most of the job is. I'm like, I don't know if I can do that. My personality doesn't really match with that ambition. And my mum had at the same time advised me that women would love a guy that can cook and clean and look after himself and look after them. So I did hospitality in high school. In year 11, 12, I did commercial cookery hospitality. And while I loved it, I kind of just thought it'd be a good way to learn how to cook so I could pick up a great partner in life, and ended up very true in that respect. Cooking has definitely improved my score overall, but it's definitely just ended up being a career. Like, really, my hospitality teacher was kind of like, oh, you've got like a bit of a natural knack for this. You should really consider it. And I was like, look, I don't want to give up weekends. I don't want to work Friday, Saturday night. I want to see my friends, blah, blah, blah. I was speaking to chefs and they're like, don't do it. It's crazy. But yeah, here I am. 20 years later, here I am.
You mentioned that you're in Bathurst, but you spent a lot of your career in Sydney. When did you make that transition to Sydney, and what was it like for you?
As soon as I finished my apprenticeship, actually. So I did my apprenticeship in Bathurst at a few different establishments, Crowded House mainly being my first one. And it was kind of the top of the dining scene at Bathurst at that time. And then the chef of there went and opened up a restaurant called 92. So I followed him across. But it was just kind of getting to Sydney was like I was starting my career all over again. My first chef in Sydney was Alessandro Pavoni at the Park Hyatt Hotel. Most people would probably know Alessandro. He's quite the character, and Park Hyatt was quite the property. So it was a big wake up call. Basically, everything that I learned in Bathurst was irrelevant.
Take us back to those first couple of years in Sydney. Who were the sort of important people and venues that you worked at, and do you have any stories of that time?
Look, I suppose pre-travelling stage when I was in Sydney, which are probably my most formative years of cooking, Alessandro Pavoni was my number one sort of driver at the start. He really, I think he saw something in me enough to take me under his wing, and he said to me in his big burly Italian accent, I'm going to teach you how to cook. You fucking forget everything. And literally he put me on the sections. He put me on pasta section, which was the biggest wake up call to me. Pasta in Bathurst was certainly not handmade fresh every morning. And with the amount of love and respect and care that goes into it, and the amount of work, like pasta sections are always beasts of sections. And Park Hyatt, you had 3 different flavored risottos on the menu. You had filled agnolotti, you had long pasta, you had short pasta. It was a big wake up call to me, and it actually sparked a lifetime obsession and passion with pasta. I still love making pasta to this day. It's still considered my baby. And then after sort of a year and a half with Alessandro Pavoni at the Hyatt, he recommended I go work for his mate up in the Northern Beaches, Giovanni Pilu. And he goes, I'm gonna get you a job at Pilu because I really think you need to grow and see something else. So just before he finished up at the Park Hyatt, he got me in a trial up at Pilu, and I went up there. And while I wouldn't say it was a world away from the Park Hyatt, but it was definitely a big sidestep. Very regionally focused to Sardinia. So there was words that I'd never even heard of and still can't pronounce properly to this day. There was ingredients that were completely foreign to me, and concepts and ideas that didn't seem to make any rational sense in terms of Italian food. But that is Sardinia. It's really this little melting pot of crazy cultures and crazy people that are crazily obsessive about their own culture. And then I suppose after a year and a half or so at Pilu and doing all of the sections and yearning for that modern experience in a more fine dining sort of high-end restaurant, I set my sights back to the city to kind of find just something that would really just open up my skills and push me, beyond the incredible challenge that Pilu was, which is 150, 160 covers at a 2-hat standard. It was an incredibly challenging job, but I wanted just a little bit more technique and a little bit more modern sort of diversity to my cooking. So I applied for some jobs and ended up landing a job at Key. And I suppose that's where everything completely changed for me.
Key is it has an incredible impact on the culinary landscape in Australia. What's it like working with Peter Gilmore?
Peter Gilmore, and I probably didn't realise a lot of the pros to working for Pete until a couple of years down the track. But he's an incredible guy that just really encompasses what I think a good leader and a good chef or a good sort of influence can be. Like the way he treats his team, the way he treats his staff, the way he treats the restaurant, the way he treats the ingredients and the menu. Like it's really quite incredible. And going to Key, the first day there was literally like my first day of cooking all over again. I went into the cool room and there's just tubs of these ingredients that I'd never seen before. And, by this stage, I thought I was a fairly decent cook, and just walking in and being completely bewildered by crones, which are like little Chinese artichokes, and all these things. I'm like, what is this? What are these? And it was absolutely mind-blowing, the experience. And back in 2010, I think I started at Key. No, 2009 maybe. Was sort of like really a fantastic time. They were just about to release their cookbook, so there was a lot of action happening. That year, we just made the top 50 restaurants in the world for the first time. So there was so much focus and so much drive in that kitchen at that point. Everyone they got a taste of it, and they just, you want to push it more and push it more. And it was such an incredible time to work there. And I still consider the way Pete runs his kitchen to be how I try to sort of take inspiration from the most.
You had some personal success and accolades in that period of time as well. Tell us about what happened and then the impact it had on you.
While I was there, I was chatting to some chefs, and the Josephine Pinillet Award for Best Young Chef through the Sydney Morning Herald Good Food Guide had just opened, and a few people told me that I should enter. I was incredibly driven and passionate, and just really, really into the industry. And some senior chefs said that I should give it a go, and I did, and I ended up winning in the 2011 award, which was phenomenal and absolutely opened up doors and opportunities overseas that I might have got there, but it just made it a little bit easier because it gives you a name, it gives you a somewhere to spring from. And then sort of finished my time at Key, and then I think just before I was about to finish and go overseas, I was trying to work out where I'd go, and Thomas Keller came to Key to do a little thing with Pete, and I pretty much flat out just asked if I would be able to go over there and work. And so Pete emailed them for me, and I was going to go to the French Laundry in Napa, but then I think my wife decided she wanted, or my girlfriend at the time decided she wanted to go to Africa and volunteer to be a midwife in Tanzania for 3 months while I did my stage overseas. And I was like, well, I'm going to be by myself. I won't have transport. And decided to go to Per Se in New York instead. So I worked at Per Se for nearly 4 months with Thomas Keller and the guys, and it was absolutely incredible.
Do you have any stories of what it's like working in that kitchen?
Oh, look, it's so crazily different to any other kitchen I've ever seen. The military precision, the discipline, without abuse. I'll mention that. Like, Per Se was a very disciplined place, but there was never any sort of ridiculous abuse or anything like that. Like, it's a very professional workplace, but just the systems that they operate on, and the cleanliness, and the complete order, the complete absolute order of everything that happens at that place is, I don't think it exists anywhere else in the world. Like, you go to the dry store and all of the jars are label forward and they're all in alphabetical order. It's someone's job every afternoon to go and make sure that everything's in alphabetical order and everything's topped up to the perfect level. There's people that are employed with just to walk around and wipe the walls and the skirting boards to make sure there's no scuff marks. Like, it's absolutely mind-blowingly operated. It is just incredible. And there's, if the original system breaks down, there's a backup system that everyone just knows to go into. It's just absolutely incredible. And then they do that while rewriting a menu every service. Like, it's a completely different menu every day, other than the 5 or 6 signatures. So it was absolutely incredible to witness, but unachievable to copy.
What was it like when you came back to Australia?
After New York, I went to London for a while, and that was incredibly challenging. But I suppose that teaches you your limits and pushes them further. And then I got back to Australia, and I think I just, at that stage, I was very lucky to land a sous chef job at the Bridge Room working for Ross Lusted, which was also a great sort of period for Sydney dining. Like, Bridge Room, they were just about to get 3 hats. They got it a couple of years after I left, and Ross was an incredibly organised and passionate man as well. And but I just was at that stage where I was just yearning to kind of have a little bit more say in what I cooked and be a little bit more creative. Like, I'd been cooking by that stage for 10 years or something like that, and I just really wanted to step out and make my own sort of style of food.
Well, you did do that, stepping out on your own with someone else as well, to create a neighbourhood restaurant, which became one of my favourites and one of many people's favourites in Newtown. Tell us a bit about it.
Russo and Russo was I actually think the perfect first head chef job, to be honest. Mark Russo was a waiter at the Bridge Room, and he kind of sprung to me the idea that he was going to open his own restaurant and wanted to do Italian that wasn't Italian, which obviously it's like he wrote the job description for me, because everything he said, he's like, I want it to read or feel like it's going to be non as Italian, but I don't want it to eat anything like it. And I'm like, that seems like it's right up my alley. I don't cook like a nonna, and I can make delicious food, and I'm creative. So that was incredibly fun. Like, we built the restaurant, literally it was an old Thai takeaway place. They had woks in the kitchen and holes in the floor, and I think it was yellow from memory, like a really horrible, like greeny yellow color. I don't know, it was absolutely a work in progress. So yeah, Mark and I and a few other people literally spent our days and nights ripping walls down and building bars, and like really building it from scratch, blood, sweat and tears. The exposed brick wall going up was a 2-week expedition for me, chipping paint off walls and trying to expose it. It was just an absolute passion project. So by the time it came around to opening, you were so embedded and so in love with the business because it was a piece of you. The passion was there, and it was a big wake up call for me as to how to run a kitchen. This was probably when I started to realize the importance of like people like Peter Gilmore and Giovanni Pilu and how they lead their teams. It's all about how you treat people. Like you can have this drive for perfection and you can have this creativity and all these things, but it doesn't matter if your team doesn't follow you. And as some of the restaurants I'd worked at led by fear, and you were too scared to make a mistake, and that's not a good way to lead, because as soon as the head chef's gone, the fear's gone, and then all of a sudden that's when people, they don't have the respect then, and that's when the care's not there, and that's when I suppose people go, fuck it, I'm not going to get caught, whereas if you lead with positivity and respect, even if you're not there, the team will drive 100% to succeed and to do the very best that they can do, and aim for perfection because they truly respect what you are and what your vision is. So that was the place where I really learnt that about trying to keep a team together, because constantly training a new team is not fun. And it's also where I think I established my style of cooking, which is, Italian inspired, but with no strict rules that I need to follow, and a little bit of a proud Australian twist.
You had a lot of renowned dishes on the menu in your time there at Rousseau and Rousseau, but were there any dishes that had a foundation of pork, or pork as a hero during that time, that you can tell us about?
Yeah, look, I actually think that probably my all-time favourite dish, and a bit of a cult favourite with a lot of people, was the crispy pig's ear sarm that I did, and basically that was through a need to it came back to Pilu and all of the bits of pig that aren't the prime pieces, and constantly trying to find ways to use them so you're not wasting them. And ears are incredible if they're treated right. Like, they're absolutely incredible. So yeah, we did we basically poached the ears off for hours and hours until they were gelatinously tender, and then we pressed them, and then we would actually slice them into thin strips, and then treat them like salt and pepper squid essentially after that. Toss them in a little flour mix with we put some delicious spices in there, and then we served it in a radicchio leaf with anchovy bagnacara dressing, and with some pickled onion and some shredded up little vegetables. And you just wrap it up in the radicchio leaf and eat it. And it was like crunchy, spicy, bitter, sweet, sour. It was amazing. And it was just the ear, the thing that a lot of people throw in the bin. And that, to me, I think was probably one of the longest standing, and I'd say one of the most requested dishes at Rousseau and Rousseau, aside from maybe the squid ink fregola, but that was definitely my favourite. But then also, we also did a little maiale al latte, which is like cooking milk in pig. So you'd get young pork, and it's a very traditional thing. You cook it in milk, and it's so tender, and it's so flavorful and soft and luscious. But then we would finish it over charcoal, and then just to get that little bit of smokiness and char on the outside. And then the milk that you cook the pork in, which was infused with bay leaf and garlic and thyme and lemon zest and all that, you would use that to make a sauce, and you just pour that over the pork, and it was phenomenal as well, because the milk really, really, really works to tenderize the pork and soften the fat, and it just takes away any, so good, so lush.
You mentioned how, in the early years, Pilu was so important to you and the foundation of your career, but you ended up going back and running the kitchen. How different was that for you?
So different. Number one, I suppose Pilu was so different by that stage as well. Danny Mulligan, the original head chef from Pilu, had moved on, and the next chef that came along, Matteo Zamboni, who is from the north of Italy, whereas Danny Mulligan, again, was an Aussie cooking Sardinian food, which I actually think is super. It's a completely different angle that you look at when you're looking at Italian food. I actually think if Aussies are going to cook Italian food, they really try to either make it really traditional or they try to make it really different. And Danny was definitely a traditionalist. He really, really wanted it to speak Giovanni's story. And that was the biggest lesson that I learned. That is, I defined the balance between creating the food that I wanted to cook, but also the food that made sense, because there's no point in going to a restaurant and trying to change the ethos or whatever of a place like Pilu. You've got to go there and you've got to keep that ethos and that direction alive, but yet also get some personal satisfaction out of it. So that was the biggest challenge, and the biggest fun for me really was Giovanni would tell me a story and I would turn that story into a dish. So I got my creative outlet and he got the story of him eating sea urchin as a kid, blah, blah, blah. And, and Giovanni loves to tell a story and I love to tell a story. So it was a very beautiful thing. But yeah, it was definitely a challenge at the start to try to sell a culture that you had never really been involved in other than working in a restaurant.
You mentioned at the top of the show a little bit about the suckling pig at Pilu and how each head chef has had the chance to put their own sort of spin on it. What did you do?
Well, look, we just worked on the times and temperatures just to give it a longer, slower cook at the start, just to relax that meat, and then a little bit of a in the middle cook to melt the fat, and then a really high cook at the end to crisp the skin. But I suppose like a lot of the time it was served either for two to share or whatever, whereas I really wanted it to just be on the menu. I wanted it to be really accessible, but I wanted the garnishes to have a bit of fun. So, we did ones where we cooked the heads and we shredded all the head meat down and made it into almost like a rillette mix, and then we wrapped that inside cabbage leaves and cooked it over the charcoal. Little things like that where you get to really play with the garnish. And then, we started separating the pig from the main plate so it looked a little bit more like an experience, and serving it on the side. So, yeah, just really just trying to work out the delivery of it, because a bit of suckling pig on a plate isn't the most elegant and refined thing in the world, but I sort of wanted to keep that rusticity but almost enforce it. So by then Giovanni had all these beautiful boards that he got from a special wood from Sardinia, that like a cork, and we were presenting them on there with like rosemary and torching it so it kind of smoked up around the pig, and it was just creating a little bit more of a delivery and a little bit more of an experience. But mainly I just had fun with the garnish. I just really changed the garnishes a lot and played around with the accompaniments and making sausages out of the leftover meat, and really just having fun with it.
How did the gig at Raes come about?
Well, look, it was actually very serendipitous. My partner was, we had a holiday booked to Fiji and my partner was pregnant, and our doctor said shouldn't go to Fiji when you're pregnant. So we decided to go to Byron Bay. Try to go to Byron Bay anyway. We couldn't get accommodation because it was peak school holiday period, and little did I know how popular Byron Bay was. But I'd actually never been to the region before. I'd only ever driven through it. So I didn't really understand what the region was. I always thought it was kind of a place for surfers, stoners and holiday makers. And so we ended up staying in Kingscliff, which is about an hour up the road, and spent a bit of time in Byron. We went to the farmers markets, and it was really eye-opening because there's a culture here that is so obsessed with food and produce and ingredients. I suppose it's just there wasn't a lot of restaurants telling the story, but there really was this incredible food culture. And the producers were so passionate about what they did. And when the producer and the grower is passionate about what they do, you're going to get good produce. And the soil's phenomenal, the climate's phenomenal. And I was like, wow, this is everything that I've ever dreamed of in a regional setting. Because Tammy and I were, we already had a 2-year-old by that stage. So we were talking about what the next step was, because living in an apartment in the northern beaches of Sydney wasn't really working anymore. So the gig at Raes didn't come up by any sort of want for a new job or to leave Pilu. I was really happy there and really, I think, in my element at that moment. But then we just yearned for space. We yearned for a yard, and we yearned for the country life that we both, because my partner and I are both from Bathurst. So Tammy and I were always talking about like having a proper yard or having a bit of land or something like that. And then, lo and behold, Byron Bay ended up being the dream location. She could get a job. She's a nurse, so she could get a job here easily. It was still in New South Wales, so it was still really comfortable to kind of transition from. And then I came home from work one day a couple of months later, and my wife had pulled up a list of blocks of land that were for sale. And she's like, I think we should go look at land. I'm like, sorry, what? Huh? What do you mean? She's like, I think we should buy land. I'm like, shit, all right. So we flew up here a few times on my days off to look at a few blocks of land, and we found a great one in Chillingham, which we should start building on at the end of this year. It's been a very long process. That's a whole new story, probably a whole new podcast for that one. But and then it was just like literally just life was going to continue. We're just going to keep the land for a few years. And then by the time my son started school, we were going to move up here, and I was going to open a restaurant or something like that. But a mate up here, David Lovett, told me of Raes on Wategos and needing a head chef. And my first response was, what the hell is Raes on Wategos? I've never heard of it. The restaurant had never really made an impact, and the accommodation certainly didn't come up in my filters when I was looking on booking.com for Byron Bay places to stay, because the price. So I never heard of it. I'd never even heard of it. I had sort of reached out about the job at Paper Daisy, and because Ben Devlin was leaving at that stage, and that's how I found out about Raes. And man, like as soon as I Googled the property and looked at their Instagram profile, I was like, holy shit, that place is incredible. Why isn't this a really well-known regional restaurant? Why isn't this awarded? Why isn't this, like, what's the story? So, I spoke to Francesca Webster, who was the general manager at the time, and it went from a 3-year dream to I'm flying up in 2 weeks to meet everyone and have a walk through the property. And then it went from a 3-month to we really need someone in a month. And then all of a sudden, it was 6 weeks later, we're in the Northern Rivers. Haven't looked back since.
There's some pretty incredible producers in that region. Do you have any connections with pig farmers of the region and utilise them in the kitchen?
So when I first got up here, I suppose my obsession with pig was very strong. And I reached out to a gentleman that I met at the farmers markets from Esperanza Farm, and he does free-range organic pork. But what was mainly my interest was he was actually doing his own prosciuttos from his own pigs. So for a little while, for the start at Raes, I was featuring his prosciutto that he made himself on his farm, which was so phenomenal. It was absolutely phenomenal. And then, that was an incredible one. And then the guys down at Clarence River Free Range Pork, or Mighty Clarence Free Range Pork, they've been my sort of main go-to suppliers. And obviously you got Bangalore sweet pork. There's actually quite a few up here, but I suppose the biggest one for me, in terms of not the pig itself, but pig products, has been Salumi Australia. Like, they're located 20 minutes up the road from Raes, and the things I can get from those guys, like the Nduja. Like, Nduja is my favorite pork product of all time. It's probably one of my top 2-3 ingredients on the entire planet. And their Nduja is phenomenal. And we use their Nduja a lot for seasoning, a lot for enhancing sauces or broths, and, spread on toast. It's the best thing in the world. Salumi Australia has been a big one for me up here. I already had a pre-existing relationship with them when I was at Pilu anyway, because they were the guys that Giovanni started making Bottega with many moons ago. And they were suppliers of all of the Salumi products for Pilu freshwater. So it was kind of a natural relationship that we already had, but I've just taken it that one step further to go direct through them and to be a little bit more involved with their ingredients and their products.
Is there a dish or two that you can tell us about that sort of exemplifies, your cooking at the moment, but also, relies on pork to a degree?
Yeah, well, look, so pork, I've actually got suckling pig on the menu at the moment, which was kind of crazy and serendipitous when you messaged me the other day. But it's one of those things that gives me a little bit of PTSD, because when you do, 30 plus pigs a week for, I think I worked at Pilu for 6 years, 6.5 years in total by the time I did both rounds. It's a lot of suckling pig, and you eat a lot of suckling pig, and that sounds great. Like, to someone listening to this podcast who's tried it a couple of times, they'll be like, that's my dream. It's really not. It really is. And after a couple of years, it's really not a dream. It's a curse, because it's so fucking good. And then you eat it, and then you eat it, and then you eat it, and then it's still so good. So you need to eat it, but you really just don't want to eat it. And then the amount of times you have to use it in staff meal and stuff like that, it really dominates your life in every way, shape, or form. So I only do it every now and then, because it's one of those things that, as much as I love it, it does take over the entirety of the kitchen. Even my meat chef yesterday was stressing because he's got 4 other mains to cook, and all of a sudden there's a pig away, and it's like everything stops. Carve the pig, like the oven was taken for 3 hours in the morning because the pigs are in. So my pastry chef couldn't do his pastries. So yeah, there's a reason why it's only on for a short time. But my favorite way to cook is on the bone, obviously, and then we actually get some amazing pork cutlets on the bone, and they're my favorite. Like, I truly just, anything on the bone is so good, but we brine it in sort of like a beer spiced brine for a couple of days, and we take it out. Like, brining is your pig's best friend, especially when dealing with something like a chop, when you do have that lean loin surrounded by beautiful fat and bone, but that loin is still very delicate and very, I suppose, has the tendency to really dry up. So we brine it for a couple of days. First way I ever did it on the menu was to sort of inspired by a cotoletta, where we brined it, then we chilled it, and then we cooked it over a really hot charcoal to like char the outside, but essentially the inside was still raw. Then we would crumb it in like mustard, and then your egg wash, and then your herbed sort of crumb mix, and then we would pan fry it, and it was the best cutlet, the best schnitzel you've ever had in your life. That was phenomenal, because you can leave it pink in the middle still, because it was a really thick one. That was man, we served that with anchovy, caper and herb sort of dressing, some radishes from Boonluck Farm. The leaves were cooked over the charcoal, then horseradish over the top, some pickled chili. It was epic. It was so good. But then I think my style of cooking evolved a little bit and maybe became a little bit more refined. And so these days we do a lot of glazing. So at the moment we or just replaced it for duck, but we had a Davidson plum glazed pork cutlet. So again, brined for a couple of days and then cooked over charcoal until that pork sort of cap along the top is just meltingly soft and delicious. And we just keep glazing it in a like a Davidson plum ketchup almost. And it just like chars and burns. It was kind of inspired by like a Chinese barbecue pork setup. And that was phenomenal. We served that with some beetroot, some Davidson plum chutney, some pickled munchies, and that was next level. That was so good.
Has this opportunity that you've got up there in northern New South Wales, has it changed you and changed your approach to food?
Yeah, definitely. I can't really write menus anymore. I can't write up a dream list of ingredients that I'm going to get next month and start working on a dish. It's very off the cuff. Whereas, you've got this bounty of something for a couple of weeks and then the rain comes and then you don't have it. So it really changes how you look at a menu and how you cook. It becomes a little bit more freestyle, which is really fun but very challenging for someone who likes to be really organized. It means you're not really planning menus. When we're not launching a spring menu next week with 12 new dishes, it's dish by dish, day by day, ingredient by ingredient. And that's beautiful because that's the way it should be. That's the way nature, I suppose, wants it to be. And the relationship you gain with your producers and your growers through this constant communication, it's special. It's really special. And that definitely magnified 1,000,000% since moving to the Northern Rivers and sort of dealing with all the small producers and the 6 things that they might grow really well, and just trying to showcase them.
Well, you really are doing something pretty special up there in northern New South Wales. What do you love about what you do?
Again, it goes back to the creativity, the design. Like, it's really mentally satisfying at that initial stage, and then you get very quick gratification out of seeing the end product too. Like, I just started working on a strawberry dessert, and within a week, I've got a result, and everyone loves it, and it's really actually, like, it's very satisfying as a mental health kind of thing where you get this instant reward. But it's also that, like, the community up here is phenomenal. The climate up here is phenomenal. Like, this is true God's country. It is absolutely a special place, and I kind of felt like it was a little bit of a hidden gem up until a couple of years ago, thanks to COVID. And now it's special because there's so many beautiful restaurants and so many great chefs up here to share it with. That they're not competition at the end of the day. They're another voice in the call to get good people to the region. Like, this region needs good staff. It needs more people visiting that love food and want to go to a beautiful restaurant or go to a great bar. We need, the region needs that. So we all kind of join forces on attracting that.
Well, Jason, it's always entertaining to catch up with you, and an absolute honour to have you on the Crackling today to hear just a little bit of your story. Can't wait to see what you do up there at Raes from now on as well. Please keep in touch, and we'll catch up again soon.
Cheers, Huck, mate. It's been my privilege, and it's amazing to listen to what you guys have been doing with the Deep in the Weeds and the Crackling. Cheers, mate. Appreciate it.
This is The Crackling, a Deep in the Weeds production in partnership with PorkStar. I'm Anthony Huckstep. Stay tuned as we catch up with some of Australia's best chefs and pork producers to discover what makes Australian pork so special.